So I believe it's time. Once again, it's Wednesday, 11 p.m. Central European Summer Time. My name is International Master. Actually, that's not my name, but I am International Master Miodrag Perunovic from Serbia. I'm an official coach during the chessbrah lectures every Wednesday around the same time. Thank you so much for a big number of emails, suggestions, and even advices that you sent me after the last two lessons, after the Patzer opening and after the Firovich Gambit. I appreciate that very much. By the way, since I really got like a big number of these requests, don't worry, I'm going to do that for all of you. You just have to be patient. Somebody said fishing pole attack. I'll do it in one of the next lectures. I'll do also Traxler counter gambit. I'll do a King's Gambit with the bishop c4. I'll actually do a lot of things, but you just have to be patient. Let's get started. Let's immediately get to the point because some of you were fighting with me last week about talking too much and they just have to go immediately to the point. Don't worry about that. If the opening requires like a big introduction, I'll always do it, otherwise not. This time, no reason for that. I just faced on my own that a big number of players, low-rated guys, medium-rated guys, even you know, like FMs or IMs who like to play some side openings or offbeat variations or simply to surprise you, they go usually with Scandinavian defense. So Scandinavian defense is e4, d5, and after e4, d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5. This is pure Scandinavian defense, and we're just gonna go with the main line. When I say the main line, I mean the line with the queen takes d5. By the way, apart from classic Scandinavian defense with queen takes d5, you also have two more sidelines that are very popular amongst all kinds of levels. So there is a line with knight f6, and when you play d4, Portuguese variation with bishop g4. It is not going to be a subject of this lesson, and I won't show you how should you face this one. Actually, you should check games of Grandmaster Tiviakov and you'll learn a lot, because he literally kills everyone who plays the Portuguese, playing one very interesting line with a white piece. Also, apart from this, you also have like variation with knight f6, d4, and knight takes d5, but about this line maybe in some of the next chessbrah lectures. Tonight, just like I said, pure Scandinavian, when black captures by queen on d5. And after knight c3, for more than 50-60 years, queen a5 has been the most popular moves amongst usually club players and medium level players. So queen goes to a5, and this is classic Scandinavian. But apart from this classic Scandinavian, we just have to check in this lesson, and actually in this lecture, what happens if black goes for moves like queen d6 that became so popular lately, even amongst some of the top players, thanks to Grandmaster Tiviakov and his extreme solid positions that he created here against such names like Wishian and Alexei Shirv and others. So queen to d6, you know, from recently just became as popular and as good as queen a5. I'll try to give you some interesting and aggressive approaches for white against all these moves. Also, I'll try to help you how should you play against very common queen d8 move. I've experienced this variation a couple of times, and I can tell that it's popular on all levels. And queen d8, even though it doesn't look that, let's just say, promising for black, we just have to look upon this position from one very logical point of view. They haven't done anything that wrong. They don't have structural weaknesses. Maybe they haven't developed all their pieces, but still their position looks still pretty good. And finally, I just have to show you one sideline that is usually used against me in bullet and blitz games. It's queen e5 check. Mostly they're just trying to kick you off from like well-known theoretical paths and variations. So after like queen e5 check, I'll just give you two very classic approaches. So let's get started with probably worst of all these variations, and it's the queen e5 check. After they play queen e5 check, we have like two equally good possibilities. You know what, guys, you don't want to play queen e2. You don't want to play queen e2 because after queen e2 you won't be able, first of all, you offer your opponent to trade the queens off, and second thing, after you play queen to e2, you won't be able to take advantage of pretty much misplaced queen in the center of the board. So after like queen e5, you have two equally good possibilities. One is bishop e2, and another one is knight g on e2. If you play bishop e2, after they play like c6, you play knight f3 with a tempo chasing this queen away. So queen goes back to c7. You once again do probably the most logical developing move. By the way, never forget about one of my basic opening principles, CAD, or I actually have abbreviation for that. Actually, I call it CAD rule. So C stands for centralization, A stands for activity, and D for development. All together with king safety, when you make and play short castle, that is going to be the point. By the way, some of you asked me what is unusual about this. Don't worry about that. Actually, unusual stuff I'll come up against the classic Scandinavian with a queen a5, and just against other variations I have some very interesting opening choices for you. After like bishop e2, c6, knight f3, queen c7, d4, knight f6, knight e5. I very much like this one, knight e5. It stops permanently this bishop g4 by black. And also after knight e5, any bishop f5 you can face with you know, simply you couldn't put your bishop here on f4 because the queen on c7 was controlling that. And now when you play knight e5, you even give yourself possibility of developing bishop on f4, threatening knight g6 or knight f7 at some point, of course. And finally, after any bishop f5, you'll always have possibility to chase this bishop with some g4 ideas followed by h4. So this is really good position. They have a lot of problems with a bit exposed queen on c7. Also, they're behind in development. And speaking of positional advantage, I believe it's not only about positional advantage, but also we just have like development advantage in this position as well. So white should be much better. Also, you can play knight g on e2 with the idea of pushing the pawn up to d4 and playing bishop f4 next, because knight g on e2 supports the bishop f4 idea. So after like c6, d4, queen c7, bishop f4, this is just an easy game for white, and I don't want to waste time on this position because I don't think that anyone I don't know, out of 30 Scandinavian games would play queen e5 against you. So let's go for one line that I highly find important. For example, on light chess, I faced so many opponents who did this, chess.com as well. Actually, Queen d8 became very popular. It's usually popular mainly amongst the guys who actually think that Queen d8, they haven't made any structural weaknesses. They just want to confuse you with the opening choice. So I think it's a more or less normal position. So after like Queen d8, you just have to play, of course, the most logical developing move, d4. Why? Going along with my cat rule, you're just fighting for the center. You just play active and you just develop yourself. Fighting for the center because you're fighting for these two squares. Playing active because this is way more active than move like d3, for example, or something else. And finally, it's very developing because you've just opened up like both of your bishops, and you're just gonna make decision where should you place these bishops afterwards. After like knight f6, knight f3, I just have to tell you one thing. The following lines are very, very difficult for black. And I think more or less the variations that I'm about to show you are a kind of refutation of this Queen d8 approach. So let's get started. First of all, they can play bishop f4, bishop f5, c6, or bishop g4 here. So if they play like, if they play in this position, move like bishop to g4, you just play h3. You just immediately have to chase away this bishop on g4 and to clearly ask your opponent, hey man, would you take on f3 and give me a bishop pair? Or would you put your bishop back to h5, in which case I can play g4, bishop g6, knight e5, chasing away your bishop, threatening to actually going with the bishop g2, developing all my pieces and getting just like slide, but a long-lasting advantage here. So that's one option. Another option is if they capture, then you take on f3. I just want to tell you one thing here. For example, I've seen a similar type of position so many times in my blitz games, usually amongst weaker guys. So when I play like this, I have like clear advantage. First of all, I've got a development advantage. Second thing, I've got a bishop pair advantage. Speaking of the bishop pair in this position, since I possess bishop pair, the rest of the game I should probably tend to open this game somehow and to play very active. Also, I just have to give my bishops open diagonals. So aggressiveness and playing aggressively and very open in this kind of games is always more than admirable for you. So after like queen f3, c6, you play bishop e3. By the way, they cannot touch the pawn on d4 since you're gonna take on b7 and the rook is falling. After like queen f3, they just play c6, and this is exactly type of position I'd like to discuss with you. Now queen b7 is no longer threat, but here black just wants to take the pawn on d4. This is why you have to defend it, and defending this pawn also gives you a possibility to make long castle afterwards. So this is one of the crucial moments characteristic for this variation with the white pieces. Just like I said, I've witnessed this type of position so many times, usually by weaker players. You guys give up the bishop pair just like that, and they don't think it could be good for black. In the long run, white should be easily better here, mainly thanks to these bishops. and the fact that I can always open the game very easily. So after like bishop e3, e6, we just have to play bishop d3 or long castle. Long castle gives me a clear advantage if I manage to play g4 and g5, if I manage to get some activity here. But I actually don't like when they play bishop b4. And when they play bishop b4, they want to take my knight on c3 and break the pawn structure, annihilate this pawn structure around the king. So I'm not supposed to allow that. So when they play bishop b4, they want to play bishop c3. So let's say you just move your knight away. Certainly you don't want to move your bishop from e3 because you already played once with your piece out of the opening. That's like very important rule. I know that you actually read that in so many books and probably heard that by so many coaches, players, or friends. Do not play with the same piece more than once in the openings. Anyways, after like knight e4, knight e4, queen e4, this would be easily and clearly better position for white, mainly thanks to these bishops. But all of a sudden they have this queen d5 move. They just want to trade the queens off. You know what? In Scandinavian structures, it's always very okay for black. I don't want to say fine, but usually it's even fine to trade these queens off, and black just has like a extremely solid pawn structure and type of queenless middle game. But in this specific position, after they play like queen d5, you capture, and you know what? This could be a good puzzle for you. I mean, usually I give you tactical puzzles and I just tell you what should you play here, and then you just find some mating threats and good tactics. But here I can just ask you about this position. How should you play? For example, whoever comes up with the right answer here, it just shows he's like a pretty good positional potential and like good understanding of game in this type of queenless middle games. I think it's very important to know how should you play, but I'd like to repeat once again and to remind you, you've got a bishop pair, and all you have to do is to play very active. So MC JGP, thank you so much for your answer. I'm not gonna say what did you suggest, and I just have to say that that was really good. So what do you think? What should you play? Somebody said a rook to d3. Rook to d3 looks extremely artificial, and I don't like it that much because you're just closing the light square bishop. Bishop d3 looks like a nice and solid developing move. c3 looks like a nice move. You just connect your pawn structure and create like a good solid pawn chain, but it's nothing. Bishop b5, just a random check, nothing special. To all of you who just said at this point to play c4, you guys filled this position. It immediately gives white slightly, but just like I said, a long-lasting positional advantage. Why? Because after you play c5, you just open the game up. You just open the center. You just open both of your bishops. And for example, if they capture, you will recapture by bishop, and then you want to play like a3, dragging your rook to e1 and playing d5 using the bishop pair eventually. So somebody said explosive. Yes, you should play very explosive here, and that's why you have to react with c4. So what's the tip after this first puzzle and position? Guys, in queenless middle games, when you have like bishop pair advantage, always tend to open up the games and use your bishop pair in the most active fashion. By the way, that's what happens if you play like a long castle. I believe that you can also play bishop to d3 like a logical developing move, and for all of you who simply have problems with remembering the variations, all you have to say is once they give up the light square bishop, you should put all your minor pieces on the third rank, all together with this queen on f3. And then this position could be very hard for your opponent, and for his decision, what should he go for the rest of the game, because he's now facing a pretty concrete problem. Are you going to make long or short castle? Depending on that, maybe your opponent wants to make short or long castle. In my opinion, long castle is a little bit sharper, but I think that short castle is a little bit more solid and probably better for white. Anyways, after like queen f3, bishop d3, no, they would probably play knight b7. I'd like to point out one more thing. Scandinavian defense, altogether with Caracan and sometimes French, but especially Caracan, because it's very similar to Caracan because of this pawn structure. Scandinavian defense altogether with Caracan is considered to be very hard to crack opening, and it's considered to be very solid for black. Look at this. Even though you have like possession of the bishop pair, your light square bishop is kind of limited here because it's hitting in this pawns, and black doesn't want to play e5 or c5. Black doesn't want to open the game. He just wants to keep the game closed, and that's actually bad for our bishops, especially the light square one. That's why I usually explain to my students, when you play middle games, always in middle games put the pawns on the same color of opponent's bishop, because it is going to limit his bishop. When you play end games, don't ever do that, because then you might expose your pawns and they could be under the attack in the late end games. Anyways, let's go with this position. Just take a look at this one. It's very hard to crack this position, and you guys gotta know the plans here. So after like castles, bishop d6, rook ad1, you just put all your pieces in the center, and now you just have to come up with something. I've noticed that a big number of you have problem here how to carry on, because you did what you had to do. You won the bishop pair, you developed all your pieces, you almost put your rooks in simply the best places. Here the rook, one rook is in d1, another one is going to come to e1, but still, how should you proceed? How should you actually carry on from this position? So after like castles, you guys have to play this one. I'll explain this idea to you. Knight comes to e4. It's like very important because you actually give yourself possibility to afterwards play c4 and possibly to break in the center with a d5. Why do you want to play like that? Simply because you have a bishop pair. So what does it mean? It means you gotta open the game up. All you have to do is to play like this. After queen e4, if they play g6, you just go with c4, and just like I said previously, in the long run, you just want to use these pawns in the center, probably breaking in the center with d5, or you just want to play some a3, b4, and eyeing either some b5 or d5 ideas in the second part of the game. That's the way to go. Of course, if knight f6, you just go back with the queen on f3, and once again, you want to put your rook to e1, you want to put your pawn on c4, and eventually want to break in the center. I just say breaking in the center and opening the game should be your main idea in these positions. So once again, I just have to remind you, we're working on Scandinavian type of positions, breaking the Scandinavian with white pieces in very unusual and sharp way. And I'm sure you're gonna like that one. I also like to welcome viewers from chess.com, and I hope you'll enjoy this lesson. So after like queen d8, this is where we at the moment. You just play the most logical developing move, develop your knight, and we've just seen what happens if they play bishop g4. So guys, never hesitate to force your opponent to commit himself after h3. So if they go with a bishop h5, let's just do a slight recap. This one, g4, bishop g6, 95, grabbing this bishop eventually on g6, going with the bishop on g2, and eventually playing with the bishop pair and open game, which is great for white. If bishop f3, queen takes f3, threatens the pawn on b7. When they defend that, bishop on a3. And here you just have to decide whether you want to play the long castle, queenside castle, or maybe you just want to play a bishop d3 followed by short castle. That mainly depends on your style. But most of guys here go with either bishop f5 or c6. I just want to point something out. It's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same. After like bishop f5, let me just show you. Bishop f5, you always play bishop c4. And after c6, I have a specialty with knight e5 here. So knight e5 is like one of the key moments of this variation. I just have to proudly say that one of my students, his name is James Adair, had a similar experience against Hikaru Nakamura in similar idea. Nakamura actually went with a queen on a5. He used this idea. He won the piece, but unfortunately he still managed to lose that game. But you know what? Before that, I just want to make sure to show you the transposition. When black goes for c6, you play bishop c4. And somebody mentioned in the chat room, type of Scandinavian structures in Karakan are almost the same. Yes, they are. And just because of that, I'm going to give you some very interesting ideas how to break this Scandinavian defense. Because those are one of the most solid pawn structures without any structural weaknesses for black. Anyways, after bishop c4, they have to play bishop e5. So this is why I think these positions are just about to be the same. So they just want to come out with light square bishop before they complete their development. But before that, let me just show you one trick. In big number of bullet and blitz games, big number of players went for this one. This is a puzzle for you, mainly for low rated guys. So after like bishop g4, what should you play here for white? Actually, whoever wants to play chess on a decent level within few seconds should see this one. So let's go. I'm waiting. I'll be very patient. This is the second puzzle for you. First one was very unusual positional one, but this one is typical basic tactic one. It's white to move. So of course I just see lots of answers, and it's very classic. Bishop takes f7, king f7, and knight to e5. Don't you ever miss this one in your games. It works really fine, and you know what? You're not only winning the pawn, you're also annihilate the position around the black's king. You're also breaking the healthy pawn structure, and you're breaking the possibility for black to make castle in the rest of the game. That's why they play bishop f5, and I'd like to discuss with you about this position. So whether they play first bishop f5 with or without c6, we just play the same line. You play bishop c4, and here remember, on this queen d8 you have to play this knight e5 move. You immediately threaten checkmate, bishop f7, and when they play e6, I'd like to discuss about this position. I've played myself like a big number of positions and big number of blitz games like this. I even played one tournament game. I won very easily with white, because I knew my analysis here, and I remember my opponent got very confused after I played my specialty in the 10th move. I think it is going to be one of the key moments of this variation, and it could be considered also the refutation of this one. So this is why I told you that this lesson could be good not only for like low rated and club players, but also for those like professionals who just wanna see and wanna learn homemade prep and one very special move. So after like g4, bishop g6, h4, you just threaten to almost win piece here with for example g5 and h5. This is why they have two options. They have two options of bishop b4 and knight bd7. So we just have to check both of these lines. This is especially like efficient and easy for playing in blitz games, because your opponent doesn't have much time and he's all of a sudden facing problems with light square bishop and g6. So look what's happening there. If they play any h6 or h5, they're lost on this path. So whether they play h6 or h5, you just take on g6 and you take the pawn. You've just broken the pawn structure, won the pawn, have a bishop pair advantage. This is completely lost for black. If they play h5, you just do the same with pretty much the same idea, but maybe before that you just have to take care of the g4 pawn. So maybe to take on h5 and then to take on e6, or maybe something else. And finally, the most logical thing for black here is to either go with knight bd7 or bishop to b4. So when they play bishop b4, they actually want to kill two birds with one stone. So they just want to give themselves possibility at some point to make short castle, but at the same time they indirectly cover e4 square, because they pin the knight on c3 and king on e1. So they just want to open the square e4 for this bishop. And somebody said this is this looks like a Caracan gun wrong for black. Absolutely correct. And sometimes you have problems with the light square bishop because, for example, in French, because it's keeping closed on c8 and undeveloped. But here you actually have problems because you early come out with this bishop and now you just have problem with this bishop g6. Anyways, this is my point, and actually this is, I'm very, very brave to say the refutation of this line. It's very serious when you say that something is refutation, but I think it's winning for white as soon as you play that one. It could be a puzzle, but this could be a puzzle for like higher rated guys, 22, even 2300 and above. So you should play f3. It's a little bit shocking that you haven't developed all your pieces and you just play f3. What the hell? But basically when you play f3 in this position, you don't want to give this bishop any more possibility to go to e4, and you just want to play h5 yourself, capturing this bishop. Believe it or not, they're practically lost. And they can't save the light square bishop. You know what? If they play h5 or h6, we had that previously, then you just take on g6, and those are weak pawns. You will win this pawn whenever you like. I mean, you can even take it now. And also, you have a bishop pair. You will have a pawn up. He's broken completely. He also has problems with the double pawns on g7 and g6. And this is absolutely bad for them. So that's why they can never play either h6 or h5 in such positions. Practically, there's only one move. They have to take on c2, believe it or not. That's practically the only move here. So after like queen c2, they take on d4, threatening these two pieces. But you know what? A shocking move comes now. Queen on e2. Queen on e2, and this is why I like this analysis and variation so much. So you defend both of these minor pieces. You threaten knight f7 followed by queen f6. which is a great tactical and very common tactical pattern. But you know what? What's happening when they take on c3 and grab this rook on a1? One might think that you just blunder the rook, but it's not like that. You play king f2, opening the a file for this rook once the queen takes there. And when the queen takes, you can't play bishop e2 simply because they will win the rook. But of course, you play the most logical move, taking control of the d file and having your rook on defended square. So you actually have your rook on defended square. It is going to be defended by queen on e2. And next move is inevitable. It's bishop e2 and the queen is lost. So guys, for all of you who just arrived, I just want to remind you, here I'm just teaching you how to break and how to refute the Scandinavian defense in a very unusual and uncommon way. That's one thing. Another thing, you're just watching a chessbrah lecture. My name is Miodrag Perunovic. I'm international master from Serbia. And every Wednesday at 11 p.m. Central European time, you'll have possibility to watch these lectures. Anyways, after like rook to d1, they can't stop bishop e2 and the queen is gone. So after rook to d1, this is practically completely winning. By the way, somebody suggested like queen c3. Queen is not lost in this situation, but after knight takes f7, I believe that you can just call it a day and you can easily pack your stuff and get ready for the next round. So I just want to play like queen takes e6, for example. If you take, queen takes e6. If the king comes here, come baby, checkmate. If it comes here, here baby, and you can't run away. So that's the point. Or if I play rook to d1, then just bishop b2, trapping up the queen. So that's the point of this queen e2 move, and that's the point of the f3. It's a little bit unexpected that, you know what, queen takes d4 looks okay. I mean, looks playable, especially because the king kind of looks weak here. But then you play this fantastic queen e2 move. Queen e2, defending both of your pieces and including one more threat, knight takes f7 followed by queen e6 checkmate. Don't forget about this tactics. I usually teach my students typical tactical pattern recognition is one of the crucial things for being able to play good chess, especially if you want to be good at bullet and blitz. And since you're on chess.com and the internet, you guys all want to play good fast games. I'm sure of that. Anyways, after queen e2, this is lost. Finally, there is one more line. After like h4, what happens if they play knight bd7, which is, in my opinion, way more solid. And when I, for the first time, experienced this move, I had problems. Even though I remembered that in my analysis, I was supposed to be winning, I couldn't remember how should I play. But once again, you play this shocking move. I would give 2 exclamation mark to this move. So 2 exclamation marks to this move, because once again, I'm just killing this bishop and I'm just threatening to play h5, winning the pawn. This is interesting moment of desperation because, believe it or not, you're just winning a piece again. So after they play knight takes e5, straightforward line, you attack the knight, but you also want to play and push your pawn up to h5. They don't have time now for everything. If they play knight e7, sorry, but see you next time, your bishop is gone. If you play queen takes d1, king takes d1, so you cannot touch the pawn on c2, and bishop c2 is simply impossible. This is very nice one. And when they play long castle, you cover your king, and when they play knight e7, very calmly play h5. Once again, when they take on e5, threatening the bishop and the pawn, you calmly put your bishop back on e2, and there they can just throw the towel into the ring once again. Okay, they have practical chances because they can always give up this bishop for the pawn on c2, but with a piece up, actually piece for 2 pawns, with a bishop pair, I believe this is just a technical part of the game, and white should be easily winning. Another thing is that after f3, a couple of my opponents in the past went for queen c7. Somebody asked, what if I nervously play h5? Once again, in that case, I just grab your bishop and take on e6. So once again, you just have to call it a day. So after f3, they just have to play like queen c7. I've seen this move and actually faced that move a couple of times. Queen c7, they're preparing themselves for the castle. They want to touch the knight on e5 and take it, and then we could be in problem. But once again, you play queen e2, and once again, you threaten h5 to win this bishop. So practically, nothing has changed, and you're still winning. If they play h6, you just grab on g6, and once again, queen e6 wins. If they play like knight takes e5, d takes e5, knight d7, h5, they just have to give up this bishop for the pawn, take on e5, and very similar position to previous one. I just analyzed bishop c5 because it stops king f2 followed by king g2, or they just stop short castle, but then you play knight e4 with a double threat on this bishop, and we just open up our queen to come on c3. Chase away this knight. Once I put my king on f1, I want to play bishop f4, and you'll face a lot of troubles with this exposed knight on e5. Anyways, when they play like long castle, king f1, I eventually want to stuck my king on g2. I want to put it in safety. I want to play bishop f4, pinning this knight on e5, and position is just way better. So once again, just like always, at the end of the variation, I just like to do a slight recap about the queen d8 line, and I just want to tell you and give you like some basic tips. So you always should follow the C80 rule: centralization, activity, development, playing for the center, play knight f3, develop your bishop to c4. For all of you guys, just one reminder: when they play c6, bishop c4, bishop g4, you should never forget this typical tactical trick when knight e5, bishop f7 followed by knight e5 wins the pawn and breaks the castle. Anyways, after they play like bishop f5, you should always play bishop c4, knight e5, chase the light square bishop away, and for the rest of the game, you just have to remember one more move. Whether they play knight bd7 or bishop b4, we just go with f3 and limit the light square bishop. By the way, somebody asked me, can we go over some ultra aggressive Caracan lines? We'll do it in some of the next chessbrah lectures. And once again, welcome on the chessbrah channel and on chess.com. I just want to remind you, every Wednesdays you'll have these lectures, and if you want to send me an email, or just send me a message through actually miodrag.perunovic@gmail.com. So feel free to send me your suggestions or simply your requests, and I'll always go for that. This week, the biggest number of emails that I got about the Scandinavian defense, because they find it quite annoying, because it's solid, because of that similar Caracan pawn structure, and they find it annoying. So I just taught you how to play against the queen d8. I hope you're gonna have like a lot of nice experience with this one. Then we go with the queen goes d6 move. This move, thanks to Grandmaster Tivyakov, became so popular lately amongst many good players. just like I said, on all kinds of levels, and it's considered to be very solid. So after this queen goes back to d6, we once again should fight for the center, knight f6, and you know what? You can play knight f3, you can play you just have like a wide variety of possibilities here, and in all these lines and variations, white should be a bit better. But there is one very special one. Since I opted for unusual and sharp lines, this one is not unusual. Unusual will be against the pure Scandinavian. And I'm absolutely sure you'll like that one a lot, especially because it's unexplored and no one ever above 2200 ever used it with the white pieces. There is one more thing about this one. Here I go with the bishop c4 line, and I remember in one of my personally most important games in my life, in one last round in open tournament, I went for this bishop c4 line. It's considered to be very very sharp. We just develop piece, and it actually depends what is black gonna do here. So after we play bishop c4, they can play bishop g4, c6, or a6. The main move is a6, and we'll discuss about this move. The idea behind a6 is either to play queen c6 without possibility for white to play bishop b5, eyeing the bishop on b3 and pawn on g2. Sorry, bishop on c4 and pawn on g2. Or after a6, they just want to go with b5 next, followed by bishop to b7. So I'll show you what to do there. There is also possibility for black to play bishop g4, but apart from bishop g4, they can play finally c6 move. I'd go with that move c6. It's one of the most solid ones, but let's first clarify how should we play bishop g4. This early bishop move, we just play and answer with f3, bishop f5, knight g on e2, followed by bishop f4. Logical development. We have very nice development advantage. We just want to play short castle, followed by bishop f4, and what is better? After they play like c6, bishop f4, queen c7, bishop e3, e6, castles, knight bd7. This is just a transposition into the game and position I want to show you. So here we have one specialty. It's the move bishop c7, where we more or less cut off the possibilities for this queen, and we almost trapped this queen. So this queen can only go back to e7. But about this line, a little bit more from different order moves. So when they play like this move bishop g4, after a bishop f5, knight g on e2, bishop f4, queen b4 threatening the bishop, you just go back to b3, and then you just want to go with this bishop c7. I think it's a real specialty here. The point behind bishop c7 is that queen is almost trapped, so you just want to play a3, and this queen might find itself in a big danger. So they have to play rook c8, trying to solve the problem of exposed queen on b4. You play a3, and then when the queen comes to e7, you either can put your bishop back to f4 or g3, or you can even put your bishop back to a5 and b4. In both of these lines, white is just better. So this is one thing. Another thing, by the way, I especially like putting your bishop back to f4, and after queen d8, knight g3, and playing this knight. Why this knight? Because sometimes, first of all, you want to play knight to d6, grabbing the bishop here. Secondly, if they take, you want to take by f pawn, opening the f file. And finally, maybe you want to play c4, breaking in the center by d5, but maybe sometimes you just want to put your bishop back to c2. Anyways, knight c on e4 seems to be perfectly playable for white. And finally, they can play after bishop c4, they can play this move c6. So whether they play bishop g4 or c6, guys, like you see, we just transpose into the same. Knight g and e2 followed by bishop f4. This is a perfectly easy position for playing with white, because you keep developing your pieces and threaten to play bishop f4, kicking this queen away from the center and getting an important tempi. So after bishop g4, f3, bishop f5, we once again get the same position. Please don't forget and try to remember, this is one of the key moves, bishop c7, fighting off the queen on b4 and taking advantage of exposed queen. Finally, I want to show you one of my favorite lines for this system. It's a6. I play knight g and e2, and I just have to share my my experience in this position. I played in one open tournament in Slovenia, Portorož. That was the place. I played the last round. I was playing for the first place in that open tournament. Eventually, I came second. First was my big friend, Grandmaster Dragan Šolak. And after like knight g and e2, my opponent played queen c6, bishop b3, queen takes g2. You know what? You just have to be very brave to play for like a big amount of money, probably one of your best tournament results and scores, and after like 9 moves to play position where you're down 2 pawns and where you play against like a player around your level, and you just sack like 2 pawns this way. Okay, it paid off eventually. I won the game, I came second, and I bought my first laptop, and ever since then I do these chess lessons as a chess coach. Anyways, after like bishop f4, queen h5, queen d2, you don't care, or at least that's my opinion. You shouldn't care, and you shouldn't you know, take care about getting the material back. Actually, focus on developing yourself and getting like a great activity of your pieces. So that's why I think you should play queen d2, followed by a long castle, and white is just much better. This queen is a big danger. Rook g5 is threatened, so they have to move it here. You play king b1. Now you want to play knight d5, and after queen d2, first knight c7 check with completely winning position. I usually suggest my students, guys, you always have to remember spirit wins over materia. So here, this guy maybe wants to, maybe he feels kind of happy because he's like 2 pawns up, but actually I'm way happier because my piece activity is almost led to like maximum here. Anyways, in that game of mine, my opponent played queen c6, bishop b3, he captured, and when I played rook to g1, he played queen to f3. I didn't care too much, I just carry on developing myself. He played another weird move, I captured, and I played queen to d2. The rest of the game is not even important. I played long castle, I put my rook from d1 to e1, and I just crushed my opponent, because if you just look on this, look upon this position from logical point of view, I am down only a pawn, but I develop all my pieces. His king is kind of exposed, and by the way, what the hell is this? All these pawns are in the back rank, all together with this queen that is brought out into the center, and we all know that queen doesn't belong to the center in any kind of disposition. Finally, I just have to remind you that there is another move which I think is way more solid for black here. They just have to play b5, bishop b3, bishop b7, where we play castles. They do e6, we play bishop f4, and I'd like to mention game between my student and Grandmaster Kasparov, but not Garry Kasparov, but Sergei Kasparov from Belarus. That guy made a novelty here. He played queen d7, and that was like a huge improvement over this line. It was huge improvement because it held the f5 square. Now, I know that it sounds crazy to you. My student is also Grandmaster, one of the youngest Serbian Grandmasters, 16 years old, Milan Zajic. But he couldn't break his defense, and they actually drew this game eventually. What's the point? This Queen d7 was an improvement over the game between Grandmaster Majem Battles from Spain, where his opponent went for Queen d8. Then I remember I once spoke to Robin van Kampen about this position, and we both agreed that the next move by white is kinda crushing and it's d5. It's fantastic move, sacking the pawn. So let's just imagine they take by pawn. You just play knight g3. You want to play queen, rook e1 and knight f5. Do you now understand why Sergei Kasparov's move queen d7 was like a huge improvement over this game? Because now queen on d8 couldn't simply hold the threat of knight f5, and white easily won this game. In next couple of moves, I also remember the game of Vallejo pawns. He won with the white pieces here. He played rook e1, knight f5, queen f3, rook a to d1, and that was so terrible for black. Actually, they're completely lost. I won tons of games like this, including one tournament game as well. Finally, if they, let's just say they take by, for example, knight. You take by knight, and they play like this. You don't have to worry. You always play knight g3, rook e1, knight f5, queen g4, and they're so terrible in this game. Finally, what happens if, for example, they take by pawn? You play knight g3, they play bishop e7. I just want to show you. You just play like rook e1, castles, knight f5, and this is a very nice threat, because if they play bishop c5, queen comes to f3, they can't move any of these pieces. You want to play bishop e5 or bishop g5, going for knight g7 or knight h6 eventually, and this position is, I'm willing to say, undefendable by black. And finally, let's just take a look at the game of my student and Milan Zajic and Sergei Kasparov. They played queen d7. I don't want to reveal any special analysis here, but I think it should be a bit better position for white after all, after you play like knight to g3 without an immediate d5 move, but this position requires more of analysis here. By the way, somebody asked, what if they just in this position take the pawn with all the pieces? That was a good question. Sorry for missing to explain you that one. So they just take it with all pieces. Eventually you take on c7, the material is equal, your king is still weak, and you get an isolated pawn on d5, which favors white, of course. Finally, I just want to show you one more game of mine played against somebody. The guy went for like b5, bishop b3, bishop b7. I played castles, e6, bishop f4. He went for this move. I played a4, and after this move, I played a5. Here, I was very proud on my next move, and that was my novelty for all these years. It was move with... actually, was it exactly like this? I went for some bishop to e3, knight a5, knight a4, and bishop to e3, something like that, with the idea of d5 and fighting against this queen. And I'm not exactly sure if this one works because of some bishop c5 for black, but I'll have to remind myself of this. Actually, somebody else was right. By the way, queen cannot come here because you win the queen. If the queen, yes, you're right, bishop c7 here followed by bishop b6 also works, but maybe some bishop g2 is kind of crazy because of the bishop b6, queen b7. Anyways, then you have bishop a4 check. No, I believe this one, this, and if this one, since the bishop is hanging, this, and then you come up with this check. So I think it could work after all, because probably I should come up with something crazy like d5 disconnecting your pieces, threatening like lots of stuff, and this looks playable and very tricky. Anyways, this position is probably in white's favor. I also want to show you one last thing. If they play like queen d8, you play d5 and they play c5. I've analyzed this position as well. Here they just want to trap your bishop with c4, and the key move, and you'll just have to analyze that at home, is a4. So you just want to save this bishop and create a shelter on a2 for it. And guys, we just have to stop here with all these side Scandinavian lines and analysis, and we just have to focus on queen a5. We just have to focus on this queen a5 move. This is the classic Scandinavian position, and this is going to be the topic of our lecture. Actually, I just like to remind you, so far in the previous hour, we've had a possibility to be witnesses of variations and probably some of the refutations against the queen d8, against the queen e5, and queen d6, which I considered all together with queen a5 nowadays the main move. But right now we just have to go for queen a5. For all these years, I've been teaching my students tons of different lines against the Scandinavian. Sometimes we go with bishop c4 followed by d3 and bishop d2. Sometimes we go for d4, knight f3, knight e5. Sometimes d4, knight f3, bishop c4. But in this queen a5 move, I rarely saw a reaction that I'm going to teach you right now. So knight to f3, nothing too illogical, unusual about this move. Next two moves are going to present extraordinary idea by white here. So after you play knight f3, they just have to go with okay, knight f6 is the most logical, typical Scandinavian answer. By the way, we did not commit ourselves to play here d4. Somebody asked me, what if they play e takes d5 and instead of queen takes d5, knight f6? I said that in the beginning of this lecture. That's one of the side Scandinavian lines, but very common in Blitz. And there is another variation there, it's the Portuguese line, but more about these lines some other time. So let's take a look at this one with knight f3. They practically have to play this knight f6 move, but just, you know, out of curiosity, let me just show you how should you play if they play a move like knight to c6. I've seen this answer so many times, especially on your level. Players like to go with knight on c6 because they just want to play bishop g4, pinning this knight on f3, preparing themselves to make a long castle, and they just want to hold and take control of this d4 pawn at some point. Here, white has something very special. It's the move bishop b5, leaving the queen on a5 out of the game and constantly being under the fire for the time being. So after like bishop b5, they have a possibility to immediately try solving this problem with a6, or bishop d7. If they play a6, you just take. Now they now just have terrible pawns. It's an interesting question to all of you. So when your opponent has like terrible pawns, what should you do? You should trade off pieces and force the endgames. So queen e2, it stops bishop g4 because of very nice move queen e4 with a long-lasting advantage thanks to better pawn structure. And finally, If knight f6, you play knight e5, where you don't even give possibility to play bishop g4 anymore, and where you actually put this pressure on the c6 pawn. So this is great for white. Finally, if instead of a6 they go with bishop d7, you just go d4. What do you want to do with this move? You just want to push some d5 and take on d7 and break the castles. And after like a d4, they can play a6 or a long castle. So let's just start with a6. It's kind of committal because we just have to either move this bishop away, take on c6 or whatever. So we just go with bishop a4, a long castle, and I especially like this moment. You know what? This queen is under, it's in the danger. I want to play bishop d2 and move my knight away, or play b4. They usually go with queen h5. Looks very tricky, looks very threatening. They want to play bishop g4. The queen has just been brought on the king's side. They can even maybe go with e5 and bishop d6. Oh my goodness, this looks difficult for white all of a sudden. But it's not, because you have this pretty much a terrifying knight g5 move here. And you know what? You're unpinning yourself. If they take on d1, you just take by rook, and all of a sudden they have problems with the f7 pawn. Bishop on e8 doesn't work because of bishop takes c6, and they would have like a terrible pawn structure, terrible queenless middle game. After knight h6, d5, you capture and play this dominating type of the middle game. Knight on the edge of the board, undeveloped minor piece, actually bishop on f8, inability to play either c6 or e6. This looks great for us. Finally, what happens if they play long castle? It's very common. I play tons of games like this. You just play castles, and when they play knight f6, which is the most logical move here, you play a4. I know this move ever since like back to, I don't know, 90s, when it showed up in one of the games between two GMs, and a4 kind of traps up the queen on a5 and on the queen side. This queen is in the middle of nowhere. I remember I won my one of the games after a6. I won that game myself after bishop d2, and when they captured on b5, queen on b6, I just went for this, bishop c6 check, check, and my opponent resigned because he couldn't stop the rook d8 followed by knight f7. Very easy win. Although in this position they just have to go with queen b6. In that case you can just play a5, and after knight to a5 take on d7 and keep chasing away the queen, but this is just nice for you. Finally, if after bishop d2 they play like 8 takes b5, I showed you that this is like completely winning, followed by rook a8 and knight e5. And this is why I think that practically if they play knight f6, bishop d2, castles, just a different order moves, and queen b6 before they play a6, because many players would say, why would I go under the attack of that bishop? I want to move my queen away. Then bishop to e3. Now we threaten d5. They have to go back with the queen. And by the way, actually, sorry, a5. They have to take, otherwise the queen is trapped. And you now just play queen e2, defending this one, and eventually eyeing up this pawn, this knight on a5. And knight on a5 is gonna drop. I just want to play short castle, knight e5. I want to take on d7. I want to move my knight. For example, knight takes d7, knight a4, going against the queen on b6 and knight on a5. This is winning for white. Finally, we just have to move to the main line. We just have to move to the main line, and I believe we've been waiting for this probably like hour and a half, because this is going to be one of our revolutionary variations against the Scandinavian, and we're just looking for a way to break this Scandinavian defense, and I think we're in a good way to do that with the next move. So after knight f6, guys, have you ever seen b4? Most of you would say, come on, man, we've seen this move so many times, it's not a new idea, you're just chasing this queen away, and it's okay. By the way, I believe there is a line where you immediately play b4 here. It's very similar, but after rook to b1, queen to d6, there are some different ideas here. There is another thing. I believe that knight f3 followed by knight f6 and now b4 is way more accurate against this queen, and I believe that this gambit definitely deserves way more examination and exploration by top guys. So after b4, we're just announcing huge excitements, and after like queen takes b4, queen b6, queen takes b4, queen b6. So I have my own approaches here. If queen b4, that is going to be the main line, and we're going to discuss about that. What happens if they play anti-gambit? So if on this b4 they just put this queen on b6, you just play a4. I think it's the only straightforward and logical follow-up of the previous plan, where we played b4 and where we actually chase away this queen. Let me just show you one interesting game of mine played in a rapid tournament here in Serbia. I played against an IM from Serbia, and you know what? I believe it's now too late to say, oh, I should have taken on b4, so I want to take it. If you want to take that, you should take it immediately. In the game was bishop g4, but before that, let me just show you. After the game, we just analyzed some a6, a5, queen b4. Now you bring your rook from the fourth rank and the queen side right into the game. So queen goes back, you bring the bishop. They go back, let's go bishop to d3. Absolutely crazy ideas, because when did you see that after 10 moves, you've got your rook on the fourth rank, you've got your bishop on a3, you've got your bishop on d3 in front of the pawn on d2. Looks crazy, but this is a great gambit, and this is a great way to go. So we just want to go with short castle. We want to go with some, I don't know, a rook e1, queen b1, knight e5, knight g5. Actually depends a lot on black's reaction afterwards. So this is one way. My opponent went for bishop g4, and when he played bishop g4, I played bishop e2. Looks calm, looks nothing that special. He went for knight c6. I played a5, kicking this queen away. Queen takes b4, a6, breaking on the queen side. I really like this easygoing and early rook liftings, and I also like to push my pawns h4, h5, h6, and a4, a5, a6. So after b6, I played rook a4, chasing away the queen and the bishop. He played queen d6. I played castles, and after the game, in post-mortem analysis, he told me that after e6, he thought that he solved all his opening problems, even though he realized during the game that the position wasn't that clear. I just made my next move, and he was dead lost. This is third puzzle for you tonight. So what should white play in this position? White makes and wins. Actually, white moves and wins. I'm just waiting for your suggestions. It's not easy at all. It's not easy at all. It's not that I just like to say not tempting, not obvious. You said, okay, I'm not gonna tell your suggestions because I get like big number of moves by white here, but you make the move and you're dead winning. So I got like 6 suggestions with knight b5. I got like 2 suggestions, actually 3 with bishop a3. I got 1 suggestion with, and right now somebody mentioned the bishop b5. Bishop b5 is the move, and they're completely lost. Completely lost. Because I'm pinning this knight. I'm threatening to play rook c4 with a nice rook lifting in actually 12 moves. And my opponent, and I am, was deadly lost. So this is good. And this cannot happen in a regular Scandinavian positions where they just have that solid games. I remember there is a GM in Serbia. He's around 25-50. He constantly keeps playing the Scandinavian for black, even though everybody knows that he's gonna go for that. Nobody can crush his Scandinavian that easily. His name is Miodrag. So he's really good Scandinavian player. I can't wait to play against him and to use this analysis against that guy. So man, watch out, I'm coming for you. So after like bishop e5, rook c4, what else? Actually, rook c4 is unstoppable here. Unstoppable here, and I really like this one so much. By the way, somebody said after long castle, what do you suggest after long castle here? What do you suggest after long castle here? Somebody suggested something, but I wasn't impressed with that variation. So if he moves the king, so let's say he moves the king, how should you play here? That could be very interesting moment of this game. By the way, they're completely lost. So rook to c4 is certainly very logical possibility. Somebody mentioned that one. Also, I'm just waiting for your suggestions here. Also, bishop to a3, followed by queen d7. Somebody said knight g5. Come on, man, you don't want to give up your queen on d1. But bishop a3, queen d7, knight e5. Or actually, you've got even better way. Bishop a3, and after queen d7, rook c4. So bishop a3, and when they move this queen to d7, you can now go for this and get like a great attacking position. One of the possibilities is something like this, and then you just can go with this move, threatening this bishop, and when they take the queen, check this one, and da-da-da-da, checkmate. For example, that was just one interesting line to show you there, and it could be very entertaining for all of you. So yeah, I actually played that one, my very first, let's just say, serious game in this variation. Finished very easily. I won within 14 moves, and my opponent was more than shocked with my opening choice. So after like b4, they have to take on b4. And now, if we just go with rook b1, if we just go with the move like g3 or whatever, you would say, but okay, what was he talking about? I mean, we more or less all saw this kind of ideas in the past. But I guess no one of you saw ever a4. This is one of the most extraordinary and original opening moves I've seen so far. A4. What are the ideas behind this very weird and odd looking move? First of all, I have to tell you what are the points here. You want to play bishop a3, kicking this queen away with the bishop. So I guess no one ever saw this a4. I guarantee that, and that's why I told you in the beginning of this lecture, even good players, even titled players might like this lesson so much, because this could be a very refreshing idea for them. A4. It gives you bishop a3, which was impossible as long as the pawn was standing on a2. Then it gives you possibility to jump with your knight on b5, going against the pawn on c7. Somebody says it's prepping the rook lifting. Well, if we play a5 followed by rook a4, why not? Then it gives us sometimes a possibility to play rook b1, and if the queen goes somewhere, to use our rook on the 5th rank and to chase away the queen. But mainly because you just support the b5 square for one of your minor pieces, mainly because you want to play bishop a3, and because a4 kind of puts your opponent in a very weird situation, because I guarantee that this variation your opponent has never seen or faced in his tournament practice up to that moment. So let's go. Let's go. I just have to say that this is not like my invention. I read a book where I read about this move. English Grandmaster Nigel Davis made one interesting analysis about this move, but also I actually found out about this one analyzing the games actually analyzing the correspondence games between some players. So let's go. By the way, you all know that these correspondence players, especially nowadays in the era of computers and engines, are extremely good, but at the same time also very pointless, because they do not play anymore out of their heads, but they actually use all these engines. But nevertheless, those are, in my opinion, the most quality games. Anyways, after a4, the main line is c6. The main line is c6, but I don't want to only analyze this one. I just want to show you all the possibilities for black. Let's just say they go with knight c6. Let's just say they go with knight c6. A logical developing move. You play knight b5. You threaten to win in one move. They go queen a5. And here you have a special move. You have a move bishop b2. In order to get like the full point of this move, let's imagine they just play something stupid like h6. So what's your idea? Your idea is to kick this queen away. Your idea is to play a5, to play d4, getting another tempi, and eventually take on c7, and you win the rook on a8. Completely winning for white. Then there is another possibility. After bishop e2, threatening bishop c3, by the way, it's kind of obvious to chase away the queen. They can play knight b4. Looks like after knight b4, they at least defend c7 successfully. But then you play bishop e5. What a great move to attack the pawn on c7. This is really nice. Very unusual to play on the wing, to play this very weird developing moves. But by the way, this is even very difficult to face over the board and to even imagine, you know, during the game in your thinking process. Because most of these lines are very unexpected. Imagine somebody comes up with b4, sacking the pawn, you take it, and then he comes up with a4. It's like really a revolutionary correspondence idea. So after bishop e5, knight d5, chase away the knight from b4, chase away the knight from d5. For example, if knight takes e5, you play queen d5. You don't want to play knight d6, doing the discover check and take the queen. If they take on f3, you capture by pawn. I know that your position looks extremely odd, and actually it almost lose completely lost for white if black manages to defend himself. Unfortunately for black players, they don't have defense here. So after like queen d5, we now threaten to discover check. If they play queen here, we just go with this one. Queen e6 doesn't work because we trade off the queens and play eventually knight c7 check and win the game. So they can play like this. They can play like this. Queen to b3 seems to be dead winning because the knight is threatened. Somebody asked me about the bishop e6. It doesn't work either. This is because of c4, and this is obviously totally lost. Even bishop c4 is good there. Finally, if they play e6, you just chase away the queen and you win on the spot with a5. So all these moves with knight c6 are kind of bad. You play knight b5 and bishop b2 with the idea of bishop c6. Bishop c3, sorry. So you just want to chase away the queen, and your main point here is to get rid of the queen as defender of the c7 pawn. That's one thing. Another thing, apart from knight to c6, is what happens if they play e6. There is usually a good point behind this line, because when we play bishop a3, we just have bishop f8, which is going to deprive black of castling afterwards. So let's just say they play queen a5 or queen f4. You just take on f8 and they don't have a possibility to castle. We're just down a pawn, but it's not a big deal. If they play queen a5, you play this one. You always put your rook on b1 in order not to give this bishop to develop or to move anywhere. And when they play also, you want to trap the queen in one move, rook b5. After queen a6, the queen is almost going to be trapped. For example, like, let's just say they play something stupid. You play rook b5, this one and this one. And now I'm threatening your queen. And if you move anywhere, I'm coming up with this check. And this looks like a Buckhouse chess. I just put my rook on the back rank and I want to mate your king, man. So this is good. This is very, very entertaining, creative, and this looks really good for white. Finally, instead of this, they can also go with queen f4, in which case you just take on f8 and the rest of the game you'll play g3, bishop g2, castles, knight e5, d4, rook b1, and that's a dominating game for white. Finally, after a4, they can play one more line. Instead of knight c6 and e6, what's going to happen if they play this knight e4 move? You know what? This position is very uncommon. Actually, not that it's uncommon. Actually, nobody ever played like this. I actually only found 3 tournament games ever in the history of chess and chess tournaments. So don't worry about this one. Another thing is that you just have to analyze like a pretty big number of moves, and you just have to be also very resourceful when it comes to your opening analysis and homemade analysis, because when you just like, don't be like Marshall. Marshall was waiting for 21 years to play something, and his Marshall Gambit, and then when he eventually played that, I believe it was Lasky or Steinitz, I'm not sure, then he lost the game. I mean, I cannot wait for 21 minutes to play something, and then when I do it, after 21 years, he lost the game. So don't be like that. Actually, we live in 21st century with all these engines. We just have to be extremely ready for our opponents. You have to play knight b5, threatening on c7. And when they play like knight a6, you have this fantastic move. I'll show you, but before that, what if queen c5? You just play queen e2, kicking the knight away. They just have to play knight e6, kick the queen away, and play c4. Terrible position for black. Practically completely lost. Any queen a5 I'll face with bishop d2. I'm threatening c5. If you take, I'm down a pawn, but you know what? I don't care about the pawn. I care about development. I care about my active pieces. I'm not interested in material, and I'm actually very happy with the opening outcome of this variation. So they have to play knight a6 because of that. And after bishop a3, kick the queen away, you play queen e2. I remember I read the analysis by Nigel Davies in that book. He said bishop d3 when white is developing at top speed. I might agree with this one, but I actually have even better idea. Queen e2, kicking the knight away. And after bishop f5, which seems to be the only one, because after knight d6 you just take by bishop, and when they take knight takes d6 followed by knight f7 and end of the game. So they just have to go with bishop f5. Look how nice almost when you have g4. You just want to stretch this bishop on two sides, and you just want to deflect the bishop from defending knight on e4. So after like g4, bishop g6, h4 threatening h5, they just have to go h5 themselves, in which case you play knight a5, chasing away the bishop and indirectly knight on e4. And then when they play bishop h7, sorry babe, bishop g2, you don't have a single move here. This is exactly why I told you. Even title players will like this variation and will like this lecture and will like this analysis, because this could be played even on high level. Most of these games and most of these analyses are checked with the engine, so don't worry about that. And this is absolutely playable. By the way, whenever I teach you something, I always put that in the engine, and I always want to make sure that I don't want to teach you or don't want to show you something that might look suspicious, or I actually surfing through the web and YouTube, I found so many videos where people simply teach you something bad, unsound, many times unsafe, and I don't want to behave like that. I always, whatever I show you, I always want to give you very reliable stuff. So after like a knight f6, then you just kick the knight away, you play h5, and you play queen c4, going for all these weaknesses. And I can move my rook to the h4 now, including it into the game, and this is good. So this is really great for white. And by the way, don't forget, maybe you're right now on the chessbrah channel, and don't forget, every Wednesdays 11 p.m. Central European time we'll do these lectures. Right now we're also on chess.com because they're broadcasting and streaming this lesson live as well. But you'll always have possibility to take all these lessons, and to take a look at all these lessons on YouTube as well. So after like queen c4, this is lost. And finally, they can also play queen a5. On any queen a5, I'd like to go with bishop a3. Bishop a3 looks like a very typical idea in this position, because it stops e6. I want to show you one game played between two correspondence players. Not like the highest correspondence players, but the game was still good. Bishop g4, bishop e2, c6 castles, knight bd7. And now white took advantage that the pawn wasn't on d4. And he played knight e4. Bishop takes, queen e5. He desperately was hoping for the queen exchange. Queen d3, rook d8, f4. Kicking the queen away. And after queen d8, rook 8 to e1. You know what? If you ask me like billions of times, I would give you the same answer every single time. I would always go for this position with white. In the game was knight b6, a5, knight e5, a6 breaking on the queen side and also getting rid of the weakness on a5 and weakening the pawn c6. So after this went for queen c4, threatening on c6, and after knight takes c3, queen takes c3, c5, knight b5, queen c4 threatens some d4 and knight d6 smothered mates, or knight c7, g6, rook to a3, f5, bishop b2, rook takes f5. If the pawn captures, then he would have bishop f6 with win. In the game was knight e5. He captured on d5, and after queen captures, knight c7 wins back the queen. Or if the pawn captures, queen f4, threatening this check, threatening the rook on h8, threatening knight c7, king f8, queen h6 checkmate, and that was terrible, terrible. Actually, that was outstanding performance by white, but I just have to say that black in this game played a couple of suspicious moves, but still the game was so good by white. Another thing is when they play like a6, they stop knight b5. I like this idea. Practically it could look good, but you know what? After bishop a3, let's just say queen f4, g3, queen f5, bishop g2, knight c6, castles, queen h5. In that correspondence game was knight e2 followed by knight f4. But you know what? Whenever they threaten some developing move by light square bishop, I always want to prevent that with a rook b1, eyeing this pawn on b7 by my rook on b1. You can never move your piece, and actually I'm waiting for you to play b6. Seemingly good move because you want to go with bishop g4 and you're just getting rid of the weakness. Maybe this could be an interesting puzzle for you. White moves and wins on the spot. In the meantime, just give me a sec just to take one shot of this in the water. So it's white to move. This is another tactical puzzle for you guys. White moves and wins. White moves and wins. Let's go, and you guys all immediately realized it's the knight e5, threatening the knight on c6, threatening the queen there, opening the bishop here, and going for both knight on c6 and the rook on a8. Yes, this is immediately winning, and by the way, this rook b1 move is an improvement over the game between those two players in the correspondence game played back to 2005. I also want to show you one more correspondence game played there. Queen d6, bishop a3, queen d8, bishop c4. I mean, don't tell me that no one would try this Gambit, because you already developed like 4 of your minor pieces. Well, they have lots of problems because they haven't developed a single piece. And by the way, they always feel kind of buttered to play e6, since we're just swapping off these bishops, deprive black of castling in the rest of the game. So after like g6, knight e5, threatens an f7. I'm just showing you a game between two players. So this wasn't correspondence game, but I like it because it was a very original approach by white. He went for h4, rook b1, queen f3, knight e4. It couldn't take because queen takes f7 mate. King g7, and now he wanted to play queen f4 followed by rook to f3. This is what I especially like about this line. Actually, a possibility to go with extremely original ideas, and your opponents might find themselves very confused when you use this opening against them, because simply all these positions are highly unexplored, and even good players might find themselves, you know, like being very confused and having problems how to put their pieces in the most logical squares. After this, queen e4 threatens rook f3. In the game was queen f5, went there, threatening knight e4, discovered check. And after c5, queen d6, castles, bishop takes e6, and that was a very nice end of this game, disconnecting this queen. So when the guy played rook g8, came up with knight g5 and queen h7 mate. Even though this was game between low-rated guys, I checked this game, and I can tell you that it was like a really high quality of this one. Finally, if they just go for the main line, and the main line is c6, because they just make a path for this queen to go back into the game with either queen a5, queen c7, or queen a5, queen d8. We just have to play this bishop a3, queen f4. If queen a5, you just play like bishop e2 or rook b1, no matter what. In the game was queen f4, d4, getting like full activity of the pieces, bishop e2, knight bd7, and after knight bd7, short castle. Practically the only move in this position is e6. You always, without any hesitation, take the knight on f8, and they don't have a possibility to make castle anymore. After knight e5, they just have to exchange these bishops off, and you take by knight, defending pawn on d4 and kicking the queen away with a tempi. And I especially like this one because you threaten the pawn on b7 with a tempi. And when they play this b6 move, you in one game, I found one game between two, I believe, Greek guys. In the game was knight b8 and knight c6, and black was completely lost. But of course, they should play b6. And now you play rook to b3, chasing away the queen and playing very unusual type of the games. This is what I like about this position. Ability to, not ability, actually a possibility to play something very original, something that no one ever used. So you can just create something on your own, and you know, in these times when you absolutely have no possibility to play anything that creative, and where you just have to replay like tons of theoretical moves and lines, here after like 5 moves you can play your own chess. I believe it's good. Anyways, after they play like knight g6, you can chase away the queen, which is nice. You can take on f7 and launch a great attack. This is nice one because if king f7, you just go with this tactics and the queen is off. This is nice tactics. And if castles, a rook takes f6, this one, the queen is hanging. So after this, knight takes h6, and you just play a bit better endgame. After like almost 2 hours, I believe that I gave you some very interesting ideas how to, I actually call this lesson breaking the Scandinavian defense in original fashion. I think it was really interesting. I think that you like this pattern and this idea for white. So once again, remember, a little bit more accurate is to first play knight f3, to play this b4, which is nothing that unusual for that. But after they capture, you now go with this a4 move. Simply, it's one of the most beautiful opening ideas I've seen lately, and I really enjoyed this one. Anyways, for all of you who want to check my opening preps and all these analysis, just follow the chessbrah channel every Wednesday at 11 p.m. Central European Time. I'll perform these lessons, actually these lectures. Also, feel free to give me your own suggestions on my email, miodrag.perunovic@gmail.com. Also, don't forget, all of these vids you can afterwards check on YouTube. So I would appreciate your critics, whether they're positive or negative ones. Also, your likes, because we all now live for those likes, whether we're on Facebook, YouTube, or whatever. And finally, I hope that you're going to be able to apply some of these ideas and to mention my name somewhere against somebody and to say, hey, once upon a time I checked the video on YouTube and there was some crazy IM who showed this one. Anyways, I hope you liked the lecture, and I believe it's time to relax with, and actually in the way we started this lesson, with Bob.